welcome to SVA. Very happy that Stanley Whitney can join us this evening to talk with us about his paintings and show us a whole bunch of them. I'll tell you just a little bit about Stanley. He was born in Philadelphia, and he received his BFA from the Kansas City Art Institute, and then later an MFA from Yale. That was in 1972. Stanley then taught for many years at the Tyler School of Art in Philadelphia. He's currently represented by Team Gallery, where his most recent show of paintings was just this last spring. I have to say it was a really kind of jaw-droppingly beautiful show of paintings. But still more recently, this summer, his work was included in the historical exhibition curated by Raphael Rubenstein at Chime and Reed, titled Reinventing Abstraction, New York Painting in the 1980s. Will you please join me and give a warm welcome to Stanley Whitney.
Oh, thanks so much for inviting me to SVA. I haven't even talked for a while, but I kind of want to talk tonight a little bit about the importance of drawing in terms of my paintings. So I thought I would start with, this is a show 2 years ago at Team Gallery. So this is what I'm doing now. And I thought I would show you sort of how I arrived at this work, and try to go through as much as I can remember what I was doing. I think I'm starting with 1979, and talk a little bit about how I moved through my work, what I was thinking about, what I was doing, and just the decisions I was making. The way my work kind of developed was really I kind of followed the work. Wherever the work kind of took me, I kind of followed the work. I wasn't too sure about really, what the work was, or when I was your age in school, I had no sense of what subject matter was. I didn't know what I wanted to paint. I knew what I didn't want to paint. I didn't want to paint still lives. I didn't want to paint figures. I wasn't a storyteller. I knew but I didn't know what I wanted to paint or what my subject matter was. I have friends, of course, who knew the subject matter since they were like juniors in college, who still sort of paint the same thing. But I didn't know, so I was always sort of looking. So I really became like a process painter, where I've really got involved with the process. And just going out and looking at, studying a lot of art, and really just involving myself looking at a lot of art, which I still do today, travel to see paintings, or, shows, contemporary shows, museum shows. So let me start. This is 1979, and this is a pen and ink drawing. And what I was doing at this time, I was doing these sort of acrylic paintings that were on the floor, and I was layering with thin colors of paint. And I'm sorry I don't have any images of those, although we did find some images today of old slides, which I want to convert to digital so I can show you those things. Or show someone else these things. I'm not going to show you. But I realized the paintings were going nowhere, so I started thinking, I'm going to go back to drawing. And I didn't really know what drawing was, because I was sort of in school. I was drawing figurative drawings, going to class, doing figurative drawings, doing still life. I could do all that, but I didn't know what drawing meant for me. But I knew I liked Van Gogh's drawings. I was thinking about Van Gogh's drawings, and I remember this beautiful Van Gogh drawing at the Guggenheim I always liked, and I liked the idea of ink, putting a mark down, having to deal with it. I couldn't erase it, it was there, deal with it. So, and I didn't worry about whether it became like landscape or section landscape. I was really trying at this time, really working on the idea of like space and trying to figure out space. And so these are a series of drawings I did then. And then this is a charcoal drawing. At the time, about 80, someone gave me this paper, and I just did these couple of big charcoal drawings. And then I got invited to do a print at the Brandywine Workshop in Philadelphia, and it was like photo silkscreen. So you worked on Mylar with black ink. And I really liked it because it was almost like, I I was always trying to figure out sort of what I would do with sort of like, issues of figure ground. And with the Mylar, of course, it was just transparent, so the black kind of just stayed up front. And so I really like these Mylar drawings, and they sort of, between that and those mark drawings, I'll show you some, they sort of they opened up a possibility of painting. And I'm still painting in acrylic at this time. But the idea, I mean, looking back at these now in terms of how I filled things up, or the idea of things being really rich, people would say, why don't you just paint paintings like this? And if you came to my studio, I'd have the Mylar drawings up, I'd have like these acrylic paints working the floor, I had the pending drawings up, and it was really just a lot of different things going on at that time in my studio. But I wanted to keep the color. I didn't really want to just go black and white, and I didn't know really how to get the color into the paintings or how I arrive at color at this point in time. It was a very hard time for me too, because I came out of school and a lot of people were showing and I wasn't showing, and I was looking at a lot those days, and I was having a very hard time in terms of, I was living downtown on Franklin Street in Tribeca, where I live today, in my studio. I'd walk through Soho at the time, and I'd look at all the galleries and go through all the shows. And I would see all those shows, and on my way to my studio, and I would say to myself, I get to my studio, I could say to myself, you could change what you're doing and do something else. But I said, no, I'm just going to follow the work. So it was a hard time for me, really, at this point in time, in the 80s. And then I by 80, I got out of graduate school at 72, so really for those 10 years was a real rough time. And I wasn't really showing at all. And so, but between the mark making of those sort of pending drawings and then the Mylar things with those big sort of blobs of color led to this group of paintings, which is a really breakthrough for me in terms of I felt I was getting really good space. And the thing is, I wanted things really wide open. If I thought of wide open, I might have thought of something like, when I say wide open or open space, I could think about like, Pollock. But then I want things like the density or the kind of richness of sort of Rothko, you know what I mean? So I had all these kind of contradictions, and I was thinking, how can I get those things in one painting? I remember when I was young, I first saw Pollock, Autumn Rhythm. I really loved that painting, how open it was, but I didn't really know, I couldn't have told anybody why I liked it or what it meant to me or what I was going to do with that. So these paintings really sort of were really breakthrough for me. And I think I showed there was a show at the Studio Museum, it was an Olsen Museum, not where it is now. It was like a loft in Harlem at that point, and I showed these paintings. Because no one knew what I was doing, and no one had a clue. People kept thinking, are you from the Caribbean or something? So, but anyway, but these were a real breakthrough for me. And then, because I was still working with acrylic, and when I was in undergrad, I worked in oil, but I kind of painted these sort of like almost semi kind of figurative paintings. And so when I came to New York, really in the late 70s, early 80s, really most people were working acrylic. And so I changed my painting totally when I got to New York undergraduate school. So I worked with acrylic, but after a while, the acrylic just wouldn't do what I wanted to do. Because I really wanted to draw more, and I still wasn't convinced about a lot of things yet, but I liked how this activates the space. I liked really how much I got in these paintings. And then this is one of the later ones where I realized it was sort of dying on me, the acrylic. Because they got more plasticky, I couldn't really move. I felt I kind of wanted to have a lot more going on with the work. I couldn't get the kind of touch I wanted with the paint. And so I went and got to Bob Blackburn's print shop. And, the thing about going to a print shop is when you're in a print shop, for all these years, I'd be in my studio working myself. I mean, to this day, I never paint when anyone's around, so no one ever sees me paint. So going to a print shop, you go to a print shop, you're working with people who are working with you, and they're there right beside you, and they're looking at every move you do. And so it's a good thing, because all of a sudden you have to sort of trust yourself and let yourself go. And so these are Mylar, these were monoprints. And so, I was working on plexiglass, going through, and so they opened everything up. I was working with, I think, litho ink. And so every gesture, every mark would show up. But I liked that. All of a sudden, I got the touch I wanted. I got the hand I wanted. And so they were really an important sort of breakthrough for me. And sometimes I would do it, get the ghost of it and work on it again. So they opened up a lot of possibilities for me in terms of the paintings. So once I did these, I realized I really, I got rid of the acrylic and bought oil paint. And I took a palette and got my brushes, I changed everything in my studio. Before that, I used to have buckets of paint around. I got a palette, new brushes, everything, and that was a big breakthrough. These are some more Mylar drawings. Which, looking at these now and thinking about this and even the painting in Chaim Reed at the time, it's interesting because at that point in time, I was really traveling across country a lot, you know what I mean? And I was looking at the Chaim Reed painting and thinking, that really has like a lot of landscape, a lot of space. And then really, and then when I went to Italy, things changed totally. Italy was really like, Italy and going, I always remember Italy and going to Egypt were really the major breakthroughs for me. The last piece of the puzzle. In a sense, I was gathering things to make my work. I was sort of like, out there gathering things, working on sort of what space meant, working on what was color going to be. I mean, the things that sort of make painting no matter what you're painting. I was sort of gathering that information. And still not clear about what my subject matter is. And I was in Berkeley for a while, teaching at Berkeley in California, and I did a series of these drawings, which I've never shown at all. I mean, I have lots and lots of drawings which I never really ever show. But the drawings, what the drawings allowed me to do was to really work on space. And what I mean by that, it allowed me to really think about really where that color that you see now is going to be in space. And I knew that I had to, I think in order for color not to be decorative, you have to get it in the right space, And so drawing is a big key to the color. So this is the painting with the Chaim Reed. And these came after I did the, the Mylar and those monoprints. They led to this group of paintings. And I think I maybe only made about 3 or 4 big paintings like this because I really wasn't showing them anyplace. And most of them were smaller. And, I think this sort of, if you saw that painting or you have an idea of that painting. But I was looking at this painting thinking about, all those trips across country and all that idea of space. But, I felt though at this time, I just felt that I couldn't do anything with a white line. I don't know why. I couldn't make a color line. I couldn't, I felt that if I put those things together, I would suck the air out of it. I thought I would lose, because I wanted a lot of air. I wanted lots and lots of space. I wanted a lot of air. And I still was, sort of a sort of color ground thing. I work with neutral color and then build up from the back. And that's something I always in my whole life was to start off acting with the idea of start from the back and then build myself forward, in terms of an idea of space. And this is another thing which I still have, is a smaller painting. And I started making these smaller works because the big ones cost me a lot and I wasn't really showing them. And I wanted to do a lot more work, and so I started making these smaller works. And also I was starting to work, like that big painting you saw, and after the acrylic thing, I started working really on stretched canvases, not on the floor. And I was painting these kind of circles, because I kept wanting to think, I wanted things really organic. I wanted things very natural. I didn't want to have things sort of not be sort of like the hand, the gesture. And it kind of happened really because that's how I mixed the paint. I would just mix the paint like that. So I started putting it on the canvas like that. But I like the idea of like I could really, you know, shift things, and again, sort of the color ground, that field, neutral ground, white line, and then the sort of colored balls. I remember one time I got a review, and I think Roberta Smith said they were party balloons. And I thought, oh God, they're party balloons. And so I'm still struggling to sort of, you know, figure out sort of what this is or what's going on with it. And, but you know, this is a painting I still like, and because I like the way that green sits in that gray. That's probably the best part of the thing I like. Add that green in the left sits in the gray. So I'm still working with that sort of field idea of things on the field, or still the air is sort of like sky air, or that kind of space, like, you know, the sky landscape still. There's some other ones I did. And these are probably really starting to get closer to the square. And these were, for me to make a big painting is not very hard. For me to make an easel-sized painting or a small painting is very hard. I make small 12 by 12 paintings, I can do that. It's almost like, to me, it's almost like jewelry. But once I get to like this size, 39, 45 inches, 25 inches, it's very hard for me to work in that space. It's hard for me to sort of to make it radical. And so these paintings I was making, I was showing these paintings. I think actually the deal I'm with right now, Jose Ferrer had a gallery Lower East Side in the 80s, and I was showing things there. And I like the idea of condensing the space. I like the idea of having something where it was hard for me to move. Like, how was I going to get this into a good rhythm, a good space, a good gesture? So I like that kind of. If I work with a rectangle, it was kind of easy for me to move. I could keep stretching out. So I wanted to have something that had resistance to that stretching out. You know, I still have a good rhythm to it. And so these were really hard for me to make. And that was a good thing. And then you can see the lines starting to come. And this is a painting that was, I look at this painting now and I go, it's unfinished. I could work on it now. I can see what to do now, you know. But at the time, it was a big thing because all of a sudden, I'm not on the ground, figure ground. The blue was painted over, and the blue becomes sitting up with the red or the yellow, so that was a big thing. All these things that are so easy to do physically and so hard to conceive of mentally. That's the funny thing about painting. You know, you can do things that are very easy physically, but they're very hard to conceive mentally. You know what I mean? And they seem, when you go back and look at it, you think, oh, well, that's easy. But at the time, you know, it's like you're looking at things that you don't know what it is or where it came from, or you know, or why it is. And I think by 91, I guess by 91, I was teaching at Tyler School of Art, and they have a school in Italy, and so we went to Italy to live for a couple of years. And that was a big thing. When I went to Italy, what I got involved with Italy was really living in Rome, and really the architecture. And before that, I really wasn't involved with architecture. I was more involved with the idea of space, but not architecture. And then when I went to Italy and living in Rome, such a beautiful city, like living in a museum, it's like living in a museum. The architecture itself, just the buildings, the light, that was a big thing. You know, I mean, I could go to the Pantheon every day if I wanted. I could go over to the Vatican, you know, and look at the Vatican facade if I wanted. I mean, everywhere I could go. And so the scale and that weight really was a big, big thing. And then, I started going, we went to Egypt, but I'll talk about that later. But then I started doing these crown drawings, back to drawing. So I was always like painting, drawing, printmaking, drawing. Anytime I would anytime I got lost, or anytime I wanted to open things up or question things, I'd go to drawing. The thing about drawing, I think, you know, especially for, I think, all young painters is, every generation has to figure out what drawing is. You know, you have to figure out what is drawing, I think. So for me, you know, like I said, I could draw a fig, but that wasn't mine. Like I say, in art school, I would make these drawings, I put them in my locker. Teachers say, bring them back for a grade. I bring them back for a grade, and that was drawing. But even when I got to New York, the painters I knew, who were mostly, I knew a lot of color field painters, who were, and they didn't draw at all, and their paintings looked like it. And I really realized that drawing is really it. And if you think about something like people who get stuck, like Guston, how he got out of that drawing. Think about Bryce Martin, how he got out of that drawing. And so I really learned that drawing really was the key, and I had to figure out drawing. And the black and white drawings I showed you earlier, I got rid of color on purpose, because I knew I could always take color and make something interesting with color. I mean, I kind of had the color. The color was always there. I had the color. I was born with the color. I had the color. That wasn't hard for me to do. But how to make it subject matter, or how to really do something with it, was I didn't know. And so I purposely, with the black and white drawings, got rid of the color. You know, just to work on. I wanted to work on the bare bones of the structure, like seeing the skeleton. I wanted the bare bones. So by now, I sort of was getting closer and closer, so I started going and doing these drawings in color. You know what I mean, in color. Which led to a whole, like I was making these drawings and making these paintings at the same time. So things were getting closer to, the drawings and the paintings were getting closer to one another. And these are like a small series of little drawings I did. So when I did these drawings, you know, I was also doing paintings very, very similar. But you know, I was doing paintings like this. I couldn't, in the big paintings, I couldn't still get that much color in the paintings. And I mean, I was still a lot going on just in terms of what paint is, and how much I want gesture, how raw I wanted things. Still the circles, and you know, I didn't so much. It was enough there for me to keep painting, so I wasn't going to question it too much. It was enough for me to get from one painting to the next, to get to the next painting, to the next painting. So like I said, I kind of followed the paintings. You know, so a lot of times I make paintings that I maybe didn't like, although I like this painting. But if it was a painting, I just followed it and did another one. And so these were really like important paintings for me. I'm living in Rome, and that's why this painting is done in two parts, because had the studio was too small, and I was making these big paintings, so I had to do it in, you know, two different canvases. And this is when I went to Egypt. When I went to Egypt, you know, the Vatican, the Pantheon are fantastic buildings, the Colosseum, all those things are fantastic buildings. But when you go to Egypt, you really see architecture, you know, and you see like a pillar that's like 12 tons. You see pillows that you can't really, 2 or 3, you can't take a picture of 5 of them because they're so big you can't get them in the camera. You see, so it wasn't so much the wall paintings, although the wall paintings for me, because I did paint from bottom to top. I paint from top to bottom. But I realized I got a real sense of density. I realized I could pack these things. I realized I could put color next to color, and I wouldn't lose the air. So Egypt was the last piece of the puzzle where I got a real good idea of density. I said density. That's the last piece of the puzzle I need to make these paintings. And so Egypt really was it. And so that was a real important trip. And we went in the time when, that was the time in Egypt where people were on those Nile boats. They were shooting those boats going down the Nile, And so I remember my wife and we were going to Egypt, and people would say, we were living in Rome, you're going to go to Egypt? They're shooting people in Egypt. I said, look, I come from New York, there's people from New York. And if I get shot in Egypt, at least I'll make the paper. But we got a car, and we didn't take the boat down Nile. We got a car with a driver, and actually with curtains, and went around. And there's one path in Egypt. I mean, it's really everyone takes the same path, to see everything in Egypt. And that was really the piece of the puzzle. And so that led to these paintings. And then the paintings started to get more and more dense. The circles started going more square, it started getting more and more dense, and they started to not be so gestural. And that I didn't want to happen. That I thought, well, no. I want them to be organic. I don't know why things are getting more dense like this. And so that was the one time really in my painting where I kind of tried to fight that off. Because I didn't at the time know that the space was in the color. I kept thinking the color's on the space, not the space within the color. Right? And so I kept thinking, no, I don't want these things to go a big square of color. You know what I mean? So I purposely, like paint like this, which I don't like, tried to keep, my hand, my gesture. But at the same time, as I traveled around Europe or, on the train and seeing things, I didn't like seeing the graffiti. I got tired of graffiti, because it all seemed the same to me. No matter if I was in Germany or Italy or New York, it all seemed the same to me. I mean, it had a nice energy to it, but I thought it's all the same gesture, same mark, the same. And so I didn't really want graffiti. And I was living in Rome, and I got very involved with going to see Morandi. In Morandi, how quiet those paintings are, in Morandi, and in fact, we have a house near Parma, and Morandi Museum is in Bologna, which is not that far away. So we always every summer go down to the Morandi Museum, and that work just kind of has so much humanity to it, and it's so quiet and so thoughtful, and that kind of interests me too. So I didn't sort of want. We could say a lot of noise. I was thinking, well, I didn't want that. So this is another element in the work that I was trying to think about really what that would mean in terms of gesture. At the time I was making these big crown drawings. I thought I was going to make these really big paintings like this, like the 96. Like I thought if I made big paintings like a 96 by 96 painting, they would look like this. That's what I thought I was going to do at that time. But then I sort of did, I kind of thought, well, I don't really want that abstract expressionist gesture. I didn't really want that in the work. So these, I think I was showing at Bill Main's at this point in New York when I came back from Italy, and even with these, I purposely, made lines crooked or not to ever be so straight. And these were probably some of the last smaller paintings I did, which I don't really like. But I'm getting, more and more color. The color is funny, I haven't talked much about the color really because it's funny with me. The color is just something that I always did. Even as a kid, I always used a lot of color. And I always tell the story when I went to arts. I went to arts when I was a little kid at art school, and everyone's painting portraits, and I used a lot of color, and I used every color. And so and the teacher really liked it, but I thought it was really weird. And no one else used that much color. So I took it to my parents, and I said, "What's this?" So I never went back. So I always had the color, but I can talk about that. I can talk about now I can talk about the color more, and maybe at the end I'll talk a little bit more about the color. Then these are some more monoprints. Again, back to making prints. And these were something that I think the Vermont Studio Center had at that point, 2002, they had a print shop, and they did monoprints there. So they invited me up, and I did a series of these monoprints. And what happened with this, the way these came about really with this kind of idea and why I ended up stacking things, is actually one time when we were in Italy, we went to Volterra, and there's a Etruscan museum at Volterra in Italy. And I remember going to that museum, and they had all these little things for the ashes, for the dead, and they had some things and they were all stacked. Their shelves all stacked up. One of them stacked up. And I just liked the whole format, and I thought, I'm just going to stack the color. I'm just going to take the color and stack it. I kind of felt like, well, if there's going to be, I didn't want to get involved in the early paintings of like figuring out where things would be. I thought, I'll just stack the color, and then if it's interesting, it's interesting. And I kind of want to have it something so simple and so dumb that the color could really dominate, and I'd make it interesting by the color. You know what I mean? Now, at the same time I say that, the reason I could do that is because I worked so hard on really, earlier, was working on the drawing, working on the space. So it wasn't just like by chance where these things were going to be in space, right? But I'm going to go back and say that was a big thing. And then I started making these 12 by 12 paint, which I still do. Now what I do is, this is one of the first one I did, which I still have. I think I remember David Davis. I went over there. Art supply dealer around, and he had some small canvases. I got a few of these little 12 by 12. And so now what I do is when I work on the big paintings, I work on these little 12 by 12. I don't show them much, although now I'm drawing again a lot in black and white again, but I mostly paint the big paintings, and I have these little 12 by 12 canvases, and I make these, because by the time I make a big painting, I feel like I'm really in a good rhythm, and then I just make these little paintings. They're not, and people come in and say, are they studies? No, they're not always studies, they're just little paintings that I do. And these are some other drawings. I started doing 2 black and white drawings that I did. And, with me, you can see all the way through, it's the idea of keeping things really rich, keeping things really, certain density. And, but I think the thing is really full, but very, very rich. So the idea is that it's not color. If it's not color, then I'll do it with a mark and make everything sort of very colorful and black and white. So one thing feeds the other. The paintings feed the drawings feed the painting. The drawings feed the paintings, the drawings feed, well, you know what I mean. See, there's some more drawings. And actually, I just showed these drawings this year. Um, I'd never even seen the drawings that much, but so now people sort of know the paintings now. So at my dealer, we were starting to show the drawings. So the art fair, I think this year, my dealer did a black and white booth. So in Basel, so we showed these black and white drawings. And now, actually, he's looking at this work now, especially even with the Chaim Reed thing and show, and putting that other painting, that old painting I hadn't seen and we had in storage forever since I did it. I think I showed it once at Pennsylvania Academy when I was painting it in those years, 89 or 86, whatever it was. Going back and looking at those now, sort of going back and looking at those paintings, it's interesting because, there's certain things when you go back and look at your old work, at least for me now, since I have this history, you can go back and look about like, well, when you made this turn and when you made that turn, or would you go back and do this, or like even when I'm looking at, like even those drawings I just showed you, like before I made decisions about to get rid of gesture, to get rid of that kind of hand or that kind of, quick gesture, what that really means. Which is leading me now, even the show that I just did at Team, people saw the last show I did at Team, and sometimes the paint was much thinner, or I showed my hand. And I'm trying to really now even rethink, what I mean by gesture. What is gesture? Or what is a hand in terms of, these areas of color, or, or sometimes like you'll see my hand, sometimes you won't see my hand. And so actually going back, seeing the work, thinking about like that painting, at Chaim, thinking about, well, that's when I really was going cross country a lot, thinking about these paintings, how much, Italy and Rome influenced me, and going to Egypt, how that influenced me, allows me now to really rethink and think about developing the paintings another way. With my work, it's always changed very slowly. There's been a lot of times people come to my studio and said, oh, like the Mylar thing, oh, you should do these, that'd be really great paintings. And I kind of just always, like I said, followed the work and want the work to always, I kind of didn't want to miss a beat, and I always want to just follow the work very slowly and take every step of the way. And so, but now, it's great to go back, since you have your own history now, to not just look at, like, if I go look at a Titian or something like that, I can also go back and look at my own work and think about, when I did this and what this meant, or, like I say, the drawings, I'm working some more black and white drawings right now. And I don't know where they'll fit in or what they'll do or how they'll influence my work. Yeah, I don't know. A lot of things about painting, you just don't know. I mean, I don't know anyway. And all the paintings are titled because I like to title everything. I always give them names. I always title them. I do a lot. I read a lot. In fact, now I read more than I paint. Really, to tell you the truth. I read a lot, and so I always like to figure out names for them. I mean, there's sort of clues to what I'm thinking about. There's sort of clues to where I am, what I'm bringing to the work, what the work's about. So I like to give them titles. This is just, I put the one time I had that drawing out with this painting, and I thought, oh, somehow I think they're very similar, but maybe it's just me. I'll go back on it. So now I'm really able to get, ton of the color in. I can sort of pretty much feel I can do what I want with the paintings this way. I You know, it's odd that I'm the sort of signature painter. I mean, when I came in New York, there were people, you know, Roscoe. I mean, I worked at Pearl Paint, so I see Barnett Newman. I didn't know him, but I saw these people, and it's funny sort of being a signature painting. Like you look at the painting, I was Stanley Whitney, and I sort of make the same painting over and over again. But with the color, they're always totally different. And, you know, it's like, you know, I listen to a lot of music, and I always did, and music was a big part of my life. And I was just, someone came over the other day, interviewed me, and wanted to talk about the Five Spot, which is a jazz club in the Lower East Side on the corner of St. Mark's and 3rd Avenue. And I used to go to the Five Spot when I was a young kid, very young, 18, 19, 20 years old. And then I went to school in the Midwest and came back, and it was still there. But by that time, I was much more involved with the art bars. But they asked me, well, how about the music? What about the music and the paintings? And the whole thing with the music and the paintings, or the idea of sound and color in the paintings, is something that, I felt almost with the color, I had that, the music. I always had the music. The music was always a big part of my life. I sort of grew up in a house where no one was musicians, but everyone. And Philadelphia was a really big music scene. And the black music scene in Philadelphia was really tremendous. So the music really, I'll say this, in the black community, the music's everything. And it's what got people through slavery. And so music is everything. And so there's all kinds of music, whether it's like, you know, church music or whatever, you know what I mean? And every generation they reinvent. They take the same music and they reinvent it, you know what I mean? So now you have rap, whatever. Well, I'm not really into rap so much. And so the music was always there for me. So, but working so many years and trying to figure out what painting was. Like if I came to New York and went to the Five Spot and listened to, I don't know, Eric Dolphy or Charlie Mingus or something like that, I didn't even know there was a museum of modern art. You know, I had no idea. You know, I didn't know who Cezanne was until I went to art school. You know, but when I did see Cezanne, when I first saw Cezanne, I can remember very clearly, I had a little reproduction in my studio of the painting of the Cezanne I saw in Columbus College of Art and Columbus, Ohio Museum. I could have taken that Cezanne. There was no guard. And I saw that Cezanne, and I thought, Charlie Parker. I just thought Charlie Parker right away, you know what I mean? So things kind of like, so that was set up, but then I didn't really know, so you're sort of seeing sort of how I evolved to get those things together, you know what I mean? And it wasn't something that I was like, knew I'm gonna put music and color together. It was like, you know, it's like looking at Matisse, looking at, you know, Goya, looking at all these people, and then I could slowly figure out what painting was. And then the music thing I always listened to, and I still do. In fact, I'm just getting I'm starting to bring my records back into my records again. I have a great record collection. So I'm just starting to sort of, so now this guy asking this interview, well, how about the music? You know, I can talk about it now in terms of really the music, you know, the color and all that now. It makes sense to me. But for a long time, like I said, I was kind of just, you know, like a blind man, you know, just trying to get down the street, you know what I mean, just feeling your way through. And so, which, you know, finally led to these paintings. And people now sort of, luckily, people respond. You work all these years and, you know, finally some think they respond. Because you can work all these years and then go, who cares? But finally, people do respond to the work, you know. And this time I remember Clifford still. There's a great, Clifford Brown was this trumpet player, and there's a song called I Remember Clifford. And then they say, I remember Clifford still, you know what I mean? So that's the pun. And bootylicious is because Serena once said, I'm bootylicious. Serena Williams, a tennis player, she said, oh, I'm Bootylicious. I said, oh, that's a great title. Bootylicious. Yeah. So. And Suffering Smiling comes out of, I think, Fella. I kind of always think the Fella and Miles Davis, but I like the idea of it's so after suffering and smiling. And just with this, you know, sort of the black community, that's what they did, they suffer and they smile. They sort of always are laughing. So this is sort of where we are now. I mean, this is sort of what I'm doing now. James Brown sacrificed to Apollo. I know this. I always tell my assistant Sarah, she'll be the one to clarify people whether I'm going to make this painting James Brown at the Apollo. So I always tell Sarah, you have to tell them, no, that's not it. Already people have said, isn't the painting titled James Brown at the Apollo? So I have to always say, no, it's not. So. This is a painting I painted in Italy. This is my studio in Italy, which you know, I had. It's funny because I am this figure painting, but then I have all these sort of like, you know, like sometimes we fly into. I live in Italy in the summertime, but sometimes we fly into Spain for a few days. It's a shorter flight, and we stay in Spain a couple of days. Go to the Prado, go to Madrid, take the Prado. You know, because sometimes we drive up to Basel, so we stay in Spain 3 or 4 days. And then we go to Prado. So you know, this Velázquez thing I love, and this is in London, of course, this station. But these are things I always have out in the studio. This is me and my studio in Italy. And I have these bowls. I paint these sort of salad bowls. I used to paint in, when I was painting on the floor, I had big cardboard buckets I painted in. And then I had a palette, which didn't work for me because I couldn't mix enough paint. Then I had a cat at that time, so I used to use cat food bowls. And then actually my wife would use these salad bowls. And then I was going to go to, when I went to Italy, I saved all my cat food cans. I had a big bag of cat food cans. And I finally came to my senses, you know, I can't take these cat food cans to Italy. And so I used a salad, the cheap little like fake wooden salad bowls. This is a show I did up at Haunted Venison when they're uptown. And that's probably the best show I did. No one ever saw this show, but it had beautiful skylights, and it was a really weird. You know, it was like on the top floor, in the Rockefeller Center, and you know, overlooking New York, all the buildings, and it was just spectacular, beautiful space. You know, but it was a very strange gallery. It really wasn't a gallery. It was really sort of like almost like an auction house, pretending it was a gallery. You know. But I'm showing them because I think you see better idea of the paintings in the show. This is the first show we did a team. I don't know what this was, maybe 4 years ago. Another painting I made. So now you can this is sort of what I'm doing now, you know, I mean, things change, but this is a 96 by 96, I think. And how I make these paintings really is I just start at the top, you know, go from left to right and work my way down. But then when I go through them the second or third time, I can go anywhere. You know, I work really so that all the colors are sort of, you know, it's like getting a good rhythm, getting things that, so nothing you can get. You know, I want so you can get in and out of things. I mean, if you get, you know, the paintings always change. And I like the fact that if you look at the painting, you come back, it's a different painting. So there's always a lot to look at. And I really want paintings that are really sit-down paintings that really you can live with and they always change. And so the idea is really so the color, I don't want to be that you get in one color and can't get out, to another color or another space. You might fall in love with one more than another, but you can always sort of get out. So I'm always thinking about transitions. I guess even that sort of like Titian painting, you saw, I just love the transitions in that painting. And a painting to me, I look at all kinds of paintings. I don't care what subject matter is really. These are some paintings I showed. Last year I did 3 shows. I did a show in Berlin, and then I did a show in Brussels, and then a show here, and team. And this is some paintings I showed in Brussels. I'm always trying to say something about Goya, and there's that, so I love that figure of Goya's lantern. I thought I was very proud of myself. And these are hard paintings to make. 40 or 48 are hard paintings for me to make because it's hard for me. I have a hard time repeating color. I want different color every area of color. I want different colors, so it's hard for me just to like do that. Put 2 green together, 3 green together, or so when I'm painting small, it's hard for me to really get a rhythm because I really do love painting big. 96 by 96, as I love painting, but most of the time I paint 70 by 72. Because for someone's house, usually 70 by 72 with that much color is a lot, it's a lot. But I love painting 96 by 96 because I can just keep right on going and I get really big areas of color. I can just, like jump in the color practically. This is the time of my last show, which I love. Other colors I forget. That black line sort of dip. I painted this painting and I realized at the end that black line did like straight down. It's like the Big Dipper. I have paintings like this that when I painted, I didn't really like it. It was, I have some paintings that come together very quickly that happen, and I have other paintings that really just like, I don't know what they are. I have no idea what color I'm using. I don't know where it's going to go. I'm just totally like lost in it. And usually I hate these paintings. But then usually what happens when I paint these paintings, I don't like them, but usually they end up being the better painting. Though people like them better. I even like them better, but it takes me a long time to see. Sometimes I have a painting right now in the studio that I never let out that I did in 2010 that not how much in the studio right now. And so that painting, I pull out for people. Now people love that. I like this painting, but it took me 2-3 years to sometimes to like a painting that I make. But I know, even if I like it or I don't like it, it's not such a big deal. I know when it's finished, you know what I mean? So it's not so much, usually when I make a painting, I don't like it. Because I'm looking for, because you're kind of like, it's kind of like you're looking for one thing and find something else, and the paintings sort of take you places, maybe you think, oh, what's this? But, it's like you go out looking for red and you find blue. You know what I mean? You go, well, blue's good, so I'll keep the blue. Then you'll go look for red again, and you find yellow. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like that with me in the painting. I never know. I have no idea what the color is going to be. I have no idea. That's why I can have the same format because I have no idea what the color is going to be. Even when I start a color, I just randomly, I look at my bowls and go, that yellow looks good in that bowl, and I put the yellow down. I'll start with yellow, and then the way it's about music, it's like almost like call and response. It's like a color calls another color, and another color calls another color. So all of a sudden you have this dialogue. It's like call and response. And so that's how the color happens. And I have no idea sort of like, what they're going to be, color-wise. I have no idea. I have no plans for the color. I let the color just like take off. You know, I let the color just be color. You know what I mean? I don't, some people's like, well, you know, that blue goes back, or that yellow does this, or the yellow, I go, okay, whatever. You know, I have no idea. I could care less. It's just, but as long as one color doesn't dominate and you can get from in and out of the color and make good transition, that's it, you know what I mean? And I also know that if I put the same color down, if I change the thickness or the thinness or my brush handling or my mood, it's a different color. You know what I mean? So, and I didn't want to have color that I could control. When I think about the color in the early days, I used to see like Stella's color, this color, or a color out of the tube. I wanted oil where you had to really show your hand and have it that you really, that touch was everything. You know what I mean? I mean, if I look at a painting, you know, when I look at a painting, I think about how it's painted, you know, the touch, what touch is. And so I really wanted that in the color. I didn't want to get rid of that. I wanted that sort of difficulty of like, you know, thickness and thinness or touch or light touch or, you know, I mean, if I look at that Courbet painting of the woman combing her hair, you know, just that, you know, I just love that painting. You know, although I don't paint hair, I don't paint women, you know. But just the way that painting is painted and what, you know, what that is, you know what I mean? And then, of course, Courbet is such a weird painting anyway. When you paint those animals, you think, what are these? Anyway, but I just like that. And this is a painting I was in the show at Team. So last year we were at Team, My Tina Turner. But the funny thing about this is someone wrote about this painting about my Tina Turner. But what My Tina Turner, I'll tell you what My Tina Turner really is one time when I was in Africa, in Senegal, I went to the slave, all the African Americans go to Slave Island and go see the door that, you know, the door will never return. So all the African Americans do that. Well, the Africans know that, so they're always there. So when you get in the boat to go, to get in the boat to go to the island, all the Africans get in the boat, Africans get in the boat with you, but they're all merchants. So all of a sudden you're on the boat and the woman pulls out her jewelry like, want to buy some earrings? You know? And then you get up the boat. And this woman gets and says, I'm Tina Turner. Come to my booth and buy something. So I said, okay, I'm gonna go buy Tina's stuff. So I went and bought something, you know what I mean, and I gave my wife this beautiful scarf, and I brought my wife back. And so something I was thinking about I thought, well, that's my Tina Turner, you know what I mean? So that's really the story behind this painting. You know. This is the last show at Team. But I think somehow when you see the shows, you know, you get a better sense of it. You know, the color and as opposed to seeing those slides like that. Because the paintings, you know, if you don't really, they're so much more experiential than, you know, if you said some of my paintings, oh, he paints colored squares, it doesn't mean much. But I like that. It's like saying, you know, say I'm painting apples. So I like that idea, you know, like paints, but really it's more experiential than that. So you have to see the painting. So I think seeing the shows tells you a lot more than seeing, you know, just those flat sort of images. And I like when I show to mix up the sizes. You know, you get different kind of things when you mix up the sizes. And that's the last show from that back room. So that's pretty much it, really. I mean, I don't know. I probably can tell you more. I don't know. I'm sure I'll go home and think I didn't say this, I didn't say that. I don't know. My life, you know, I can tell you a lot more, but I don't know what to tell you. So if you have questions, now's the time to ask. You know. I think of more of as just like stacking colors, you know, like almost like I'm a bricklayer. You know what I mean? I don't really think of them too much as grids. You know what I mean? I know they are. You know what I mean? People say, oh, that's okay, but that doesn't mean anything to me. You know, the idea of that. I wanted something. I really wanted something really like basic. You know, I wanted something really, really basic. I wanted something that was really just so elementary. You know what I mean? And if you go back to like 5th century BC, you know what I mean? Things were built, just basic things. You know what I mean? You go look at the pyramids, you know what I mean? And just, it's like a mountain, you know. It's just, but so I kind of want to do something like that, you know. There's nothing in my work really. There's no really straight line. Things are always off. Things are always kind of a crooked, and I like that. You know what I mean? Sometimes things don't really, edges don't really meet, or you can see around the corner of colors underneath. Sometimes you can't. You know what I mean? And I like that. You know what I mean? I like the idea of even what detail is in these. You know, what's detail? You know, in these. So I don't know. I mean, it's funny because someone I went to school with early on wrote me and said, "Oh, you moved to New York and became a hard edge painter." And I was like, "I did," you know, but you know, whatever. I didn't have much control over that. You know, I mean, honestly, to tell you the truth. I mean, if things feel right, they feel right to me. You know what I mean? So I don't know if I answered your question. I don't know what your question even was. Well, I read a lot of history, and I read a lot of novels. You know, I just read Swan's Way. I read Proust for the first time this summer. I mix it up between like history, politics, and then novels. You know what I mean? I always go around looking for interesting books. I'm not like one thing particular I read. I mean, I do read a lot. I mean, because I have a lot of drawing time between sessions sometimes, so I spend my days reading, really. I mean, reading now takes a lot of place of me. Before, I used to always go out in the museum looking at work. But now that I have a real sense of where everything fits, like where artists fit in my life and what I want from them. It's interesting if you go to the museum, you see a young painter looking at work, you know, how they're studying things. I always think, oh, that's really cute. Because I think, I remember that. I remember doing that. You know what I mean? I mean, I can remember myself, you know, being at the Frick and looking at that Goya, the Forgers, and just standing looking at that painting. You know what I mean? Looking at that painting. I don't really know the Frick and look at that painting so much anymore. I have a sense of real. I know that painting, and I love that painting, but I don't look at it. I used to be, when I was young, I used to go there all the time and look at it. So I have a sense of really where that painting fits into my life. So reading kind of just keeps me really sharp. You know, reading's a big thing that keeps me really kind of like at a certain edge. Because you know, the big thing is sort of how you get in the studio. Not that you get in the studio, but how you get in the studio. So when I get in the studio, it's like I'm just right there, you know. And so reading kind of helps me, you know, in terms of really, you know, kind of stay in shape mentally. Makes me mentally tough. So I like to, you know, just read a lot. I mean, when I was a student, I wasn't a good academic student. I could have easily flunked out of high school. I don't know. I didn't go to high school, really. I mean, I went, but we didn't have to go so much. I was in the dumb. So I didn't go. I could have come to the SVA for school, but I would have got drafted. It was a 3-year program in those days, and I would have got drafted, so I didn't come. So I wasn't really an academic student. I didn't read at all until I sort of got in school. When I was a freshman, I had a roommate who read a lot. But so reading now is a big part of my life. It's a bigger part of my life now than it's ever been. You know what I mean? So I don't know, any interesting books. If you want to give me some interesting books, I'll read them. Right, I'm looking for a good book right now. But so over the summer I read Proust, and I read an interesting new novel called Sundog, I think, by this. I read it because it was by a Chinese guy, grew up in Queens, and he wrote about a black blues player in the South. He'd never been to the South. He never left Queens, and he was he went to school in Hunter. But it's a fantastic book, you know, I thought it was really, I had found it fascinating, you know, just who wrote it. It's all about sort of the Black South, you know, in the 30s, you know. But he did it through the music, by listening to all the music. So I found that kind of fascinating. I mean, it's an early first novel. You know, I don't know. I read a lot of them. I always forget what I read, to tell you the truth. I read too many books that like, you ask me what I'm reading now, like, what am I reading now? I don't know, but I do read a lot. Believe me, I do. I gotta forget. But just like I said, it's just really call and response. It's just whatever. But you know, I can say that now because I say it. the big thing is really, like right now with you, if you're a student, you really should be looking at a lot of work. You should be really studying a lot. You should be going out and seeing a lot of things. You can do so much in school, being in your studio, being an SVA. And the thing about you are here, if you're smart about it, you have the galleries, which, are fine. You can see some good things in the gallery. But you have all the museums, and you really should be out looking, and studying and getting a real, I think every painter has a real sense of art history, has their own sense of art history, and has a real sense of how they put it together. So no, I don't have any color theory. I don't know anything about color. I just I just put color down, and I have a sense of space. I have a sense of, it's some years and years of working. So like I said early on, you didn't see this much color in my work. I couldn't do it. I mean, I couldn't even do anything with a white line. I didn't want to do something else. I physically couldn't do it. I mean, I found it interesting, sort of like when Mondrian got rid of the black line and made the line color. I think, why, it's like you think that's easy to do. Why don't you just pick up a brush and do it? But it's not, painting's really not something to me so physical. It's more mental work. It's mental work. The thing about painting is it's more mental work. You're not building something. You're not making something. It's flat in the canvas. There's a lot of paintings out there, a lot of bad paintings out there, so God knows why you want to make more. But you paint because you have to, and so you figure it out, and so you want to make something that's interesting for you to look at. You're the first viewer, right? So you got to make something that you find interesting, that you find exciting. You know what I mean? I happen to find this exciting. I don't know if the rest of you do, but I do, and that's what you do. You know what I mean? And usually, I think if you really work and find something, and you really, love what you do, people kind of get that sense, that there's a love affair here. You know what I mean? So they finally figure that out. No. Actually, what happened in 1996 is my dealer said to me, he was going to art fair. He said, "Stanley, the biggest painting you can make. I want to show you the biggest painting you can make." I said, "Great." So I figured out I couldn't get anything bigger than 1965. I painted on linen, and I couldn't find linen bigger than 1965, 96, and I couldn't get anything bigger in the studio than that. And I didn't want to go out and find another studio. So I painted 1965, 96. You know what I mean? So you have those issues too. If your elevator is so big, what are you going to do? And even that they have to carry it up the stairs. Because they can't. That won't go in the elevator. It says fold up, which I can't stand fold up canvas. But they have to fold it to get it out. But I don't. I leave when they do that. So some things like that just happen. You have things like that happen. You know what I mean? If you're painting, probably if you're on painting, you have accidents that happen, right? And sometimes you have good accidents. You pay attention. You think that's really good. Sometimes you just trip over things, and there they are. Look down, find some money. That happens, right? Yeah. Well, in the work now, I could say I am the music. Music's a big part of my life still. In fact, I just, went and got I have a great record. I got involved with CDs, but now I'm going back to listen to my records, which I love listening to records. It's such a, I don't know if anybody here knows what that is, but listening to records, I did it for many years, just listening to records, and I'm going to hear music. It's a big part of music's a big part of my life, just in terms of, the experience of it. And I just think those people, when I was a kid who I grew up with, listening to those people were very special people. I don't know, people still know how special they were, really. So I just find it kind of endless and timeless, and it inspires me a lot, and it's another place. It's a place that you don't get too many other places. Well, book's a book. What can you do? It's a reproduction. You're not going to really. It's not going to really. I mean, I don't think this is like seeing my painting. This is just to get you a little curious. If you're interested, then you go out and see them. So that's like a book. I mean, it used to be that artists, it wasn't that long ago where there weren't reproductions. I mean, if we're talking really, well, probably for you it's long though. It's not for me anyway. You're talking like really in the 40s, there weren't reproductions. People didn't see things. People heard of things. They didn't see Picasso's or Matisse's or like that, or European paintings. Unless you went to Europe and then you take a boat. It took a long time to get there. And there weren't reproductions. So, reproductions you should be just used in terms of like if that's interesting, you go out and try to find it and go see the real thing. I mean, you don't want to bet your life on reproductions. In terms of my own work, there are some things that, I mean, I was going through, because most of my talks I used to do in the old were slides. And I had a tray of slides, and I called Have Slides, Will Travel. And then I just converted to this. And I was going through my old slide today, and there are some things that are in between this, and it's kind of condensed. You know what I mean? Because even when I get my slide talk, I would only do whatever the slide. I didn't want to have two trays. I wouldn't want to keep it one tray. And so I'd always think of what I was going to take out, what I was going to put in. So I haven't done any talks for a while. You know what I mean? So I used to teach a lot. I don't really want to do talks anymore. I don't want to talk anymore. And so I haven't done many slides, but this is like, I'm doing a couple this year. And so there are some things that are missing. Yeah, you're right about that. And but I think at the same time, you get a sense of sort of where the work comes from, I hope. I mean, we can raise hands and see if we got it right, but don't.
I mean, what is your speed, though? Like,
Oh, my speed, I work very fast. Okay. But that's just the way I am. It's just, who you are. You know what I mean? It's like your speed. It's like, how do you walk? You walk. That's the way you walk. That's the way you talk. And that's just, that's who you are. You do who you are. You don't be somebody else. You just who you are. So yeah, I tend to work very fast. I don't like to tell people how fast I make the painting because they go, and people would put value on that, But because it's not like I say, it's not so much for me. It's the work for me. It's not so much. It's more mental work for me. The physical work now, I paint a lot. I paint a lot. Believe me, I paint a lot of paintings. When I got out of grad school, I painted a lot of goddamn paintings. And I had a big debt, my MasterCard, to pearl paint, to all the paint I bought. And most of the paint I threw out. In fact, when my wife met me, I think we opened the closet door, and we had like a wall of paintings throughout. And we ripped all paintings up for days. I had so many bad paintings. I painted a painting, I'd throw it over there, and I just painted. I painted a lot of goddamn paintings, believe me. And so I figured a lot of things out. So I can do it. But it wasn't something that I just could do. Like I say, I could, from one I only could make a white line. And I could see the paint right there. I could get a brush and make a yellow line, but it didn't seem to mean anything to me. You know what I mean? I couldn't make the yellow line mean. I couldn't make a blue mean anything in the line. The line had to be white. I don't know why. And I wasn't going to sit there and wonder why is that. I just thought, I'll do that and just keep following, and just keep pushing and follow until I can do something else. But with your painting, you don't really know. It's not about. At least for me, I wasn't worried about knowing anything. I don't know anything. No, I'm too stubborn. No. People would tell me things to do things. I probably would have had a better career or got things out if I had done that. I wasn't very smart about career. I probably did dumb. I look back at it now and I can think, I should have done that, but I didn't. I was very stubborn. And I just kind of followed the work, and thank God people like them now. But I know I was very stubborn. But you got to be. It's a tough business. It's a tough business. But painting's like nothing else, if you ask me. Maybe it's close to poetry, but that's not. And the poets, they don't get paid. So.
Well, on the subject of not getting paid,
I got paid.